like to,
I did.
I like to talk a
Super,
little
thank
bit about
you.
shape.
You bet.
Just turn it back backwards.
Shape.
Yeah.
Now, most turners prefer to take a piece of wood, put it on the lathe, get the chisel or gouge, and take away what they don't like, and hopefully what's left is good. And which works out well most of the time. But I think I want to give you at least some tools to determine the shape before you start. So you can approve on the shape, and at least you can start with something in your mind. Let's say you're going to take a vase. You want to make a vase. I don't want to get elaborate with the golden ratio and all that crap because we can talk for 2 days on it.
Yeah.
But I want to give you some basic rules that I use that I find very useful. And I mentioned the first thing I do is I go sketches all to scale. Because you can have a sketch in there and it's not in scale and it looks fantastic. When you put it to the actual scale, it looks like crap. It just doesn't work. So if you are in scale, you already can put in all the fine line. And in order to do that, I think it's really no mystery. If you take, I've taken, for instance, this piece of paper, and what I've done is I've decided that I'm going to use this for a vase. Okay, I'm going to draw a vase in here, and I have divided. I have a dimension. I have a dimension in there that is, let's say, 5 inches. I want the vase to be 5 inches. Okay? I know that because that's a piece of wood I have. It's 6.5 inches, so I want to make a vase that's 5 inches. How tall should it be? Okay. Within that, you can do all kinds of things. But there are a few techniques that allow you to draw now something. So I've divided and multiplied that 5 inches in diameter by 1.618, which is the golden ratio. And it gives me 8 inches in height. So the 5 inch being the widest point, and the 8 inches being the tall. And so I have that as a guide. And the next thing that you want to do is you want to divide the space in three equal portions. And you have the 1 and the 2/3, the 1/3 and 2/3 ratio. So this is not complicated, it's not difficult. All it takes is decide what one of the sizes that you have available and then work in the other limiting thing. So say you have that, all right? So now I take a piece of tracing paper, which is not very expensive. You can buy a roll of these, very cheap. Take it. All right. So here's, let's say, it's my top. Okay, and I said I want to have a base. Okay, so what I do is I decide, okay, this is going to be the top entrance of the base.
Right.
So I draw one side. Only one side. If I'm right-handed, I draw my side that is most favorable. And I determine the kind of line that I see that vase in my mind. I'll take it here, and I do this. Okay, just one side. This is my half. This is the half line. Okay, I'm not measuring anything, I'm just using that guide. Now, I'm going to break this off. Usually I'm on my drawing board and I got ways to cut this off easy, but here I'm gonna struggle a little bit.
Need a third hand?
I just have to get out. Now, all I'm doing is just taking a piece and getting the roll out of the way. there scissors?
We got them all.
All right, now that's what we're talking about. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, so now I got half of the size, and I have half of the base. The base split in half. Okay, so I'm going to hold it right there. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take this one, lay it out this way, and I take and go into my line, repeat the line. Okay. Now I have the complete size. And I've used one side, and duplicated the other side. Now, I don't like that. Okay? So, good. Start with that. What are you gonna do with that now? You don't
Well,
like
another
it?
piece of tracing paper.
No, just the same paper, same paper. Stay safe. You don't like it, so you don't, what you don't like? You don't like this is a little too much here, too much here. Okay, let's do the same thing. Hold it. Adjust this side. Okay. Now, you realize what's happening now? You're bringing the shape to what it should be in your mind. Whatever you have in your mind, now you can adjust it. You haven't ruined anything, you haven't cut any wood, you haven't done anything yet. You're just determining what is pleasing. And if this doesn't work, you erase that a little bit and you do it one more time. And you can make this final adjustment. What I'm trying to show you is very quickly, you can get that shape that you have in your mind before you start into paper. Now, it doesn't necessarily make it a very important thing if you're doing segmenting, if you're doing regular work with hollow it and everything else. But if you do segmenting, now this is a must, because you have to have that shape in order to do the calculation. So once you've determined what that shape is that you are pleased with, you just move it on to the sheet. And we'll do it on the back of this. And again, you should draw the middle line, determine the sizes now, because this is important now, because you're going to be working with that. And you're going to make
Frank, are you talking about the thickness of each segment?
now, now you'll determine that with this drawing now. Let's see, I'll catch one here that is a base rather than just here. Just do the base. Now you'll do one section, one side. You don't have to do both of them. You'll have the half line, and here the line is going to be accurate, it's going to be square, it's going to be lined up properly, because you're going to measure then from that point on. So you make what you think is the wall size, whatever you decide the wall size to be, whatever you decide the shape to be. Now at this point now you have a working sheet. And again, this is two sides. This is what the base is going to look like. So now you gotta use a caliper for segmenting. And you can cheat a little bit, but not that much. So it's important now to make the segment so that the segment takes care of the wall size and the place that you have the wall. So what you do is you decide, number one, the thickness of the wood that you gotta work with. Let's say is 3/4. It's a plank that normally you can get. So you line up from the bottom or from the top all the way down in segments that are 3/4. Wherever those lines intersect, you measure from the half to the outside of the line. Okay? And that gives you the number to start calculating. What you wanna do is you wanna determine the diameter of that voice, so you multiply that. If you do it by the half, you multiply that by 2, and you got the diameter. You multiply that by 3.14, which gives you the circumference. You divide the circumference by whatever number of segments you decide to work with.
Okay.
Okay, once you've done that, the number resulting is the width of the segment at the highest, at the largest point. The segment will be attained. Now, you have to do that for each of the segments, all the way down the line. Once you have that, polish it down, and you get on, slit off the boards, and the boards are determined by the segment size that allows you to have the wall come through. If you don't have enough material, in a segment, and the inside is over here, then the wall thickness is not gonna be right. So you gotta make sure that that segment takes care of that particular thickness of the line coming in through. That's all. This is just plain math. I mean, you just calculate that. Once you get that done, then you cut the segment. And cutting the segment is a matter of having a jig. I think you can't do it without a jig. So it can be a plain jig that gives you the right angle. And you already know what the size of the stick is going to be that you're going to be cutting. And you know, for instance, that if that segment is at the widest part is 4.55, and you're doing 16 segments, you multiply that by 4.55, and you know what the stick should be as long.
Yeah.
So you have a little extra left, so you don't get your fingers in it, you know. And so you cut all those sticks and you lay them out and you mark them and you draw them. Now, if you're doing work like this, you should take and mark the top of the stick. So when you put in after you cut the segments, you take all the segments with the mark on the top. And the reason for that is because what shows here has to be uniform. You know, it's gonna be slightly different in color, but it's gotta have the same kind of combination. It's important. You mark your stick.
So you don't flip each one?
No. The jig allows you to cut them because you move them from one to the other. You don't cut one and flip it. You don't cut one and flip it.
See,
Now, you can do that with the miter saw.
well, okay, so I have the wedgie,
Yes,
and I cut the wedges,
yes,
and I marked the original board with a line,
yes,
but I flip every other one, so in case even though the digital thing on my table saw says, 89.9, to compensate for that 1/10 of a degree, I flip every other one in case it's slightly off, so that,
you're solving one problem, you're creating another. You're
Oh.
creating an aesthetic problem. You're creating an aesthetic problem because this segment has an
Right.
orientation,
Continuing grain along the edge.
yeah.
has a green orientation. And you'll see it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You'll see it.
Yeah.
And if it's on the same orientation, it'll blend in more so. Especially with larger segments like this. Now, when you have smaller segments, you can get away with it, there's not that much in it to be seen. But you'll be surprised at how you notice it on the small one too. So, I know that he has got a little experience in it, we're probably going too far, you know, for some of you guys.
It's interesting.
Just let me know. But,
So here, for instance, on this one, this is the one piece of wood and you're able to trace that line through it.
well,
Here, for instance.
technically, you can, if you take the order. Now, you should then, for that, you should put number one as you cut it. I don't do that.
Yeah, because here, see, it changes here.
Yeah.
So either that you're cutting a different board there, or they're out of sequence.
But in this particular situation, it doesn't make any difference because
No,
I'm gonna be
because it's
painting.
painted, yeah.
Gonna be painting. Now, on that one, they were all
Yeah.
marked with a top on it, and they were all marked from the same stick. I didn't do 3 sticks and
Yeah.
put 3 from the other, from the same sticks.
It's not so much about matching the grain up perfectly, it's more about the aspect, the vectoral
Exactly.
aspect of the grain that you're getting. What do they call it? There's a name for, I forget, you know, where the depth pattern. Yeah, I mean, if you turn it 180 degrees, it's totally different.
Absolutely.
So it'd look like a checkerboard then?
Correct.
Okay.
You don't want that to happen. You want that to kind of blend in, like it belongs, like, you know, like it's the same wood. And even though you do have a little bit of different color combination, because you want that, that's the contrast that you want to have an effect. But you don't want to have that vein, that grain, all of a sudden go in a different, you know, different direction, sort of different direction. And you probably could, because if you turn it around, you could have that. Which,
Might work.
once you put it together, it may be just fine. You know, I'm not saying that doesn't work, but that primarily is, it's a good rule of law to kind of trying to find one. Here, this is one that was kind of made just for a test, you know. And here there are quite a few pieces that are not where they should be, you know. And that's the reason why I brought it, because it's
Good, bad example.
well, I mean, it is something that, it is something now, and the combination, see, the thing too is when you have one wood, you have to be much more careful. When you have different wood,
Yeah, you can.
that breaks it up easier.
Yeah.
As long as you don't put this one in the wrong place, the wrong sequence, which is easy to do, I can tell you. You know, it's easy to do. But, and then there are some situations where you plan to use the exterior, do some work on exterior, or paint, or you know, something else that you know, doesn't make any difference. You probably want to show the inside only, not the outside. You want to surprise someone. You know, you just when they look inside, like in a bowl or something. You know, the outside is a standard bowl, and all of a sudden you go inside, it's a segmented bowl. You know, because it has all this beautiful wood. So those are different. But technically, once you have this roadmap, and if you calculate it, and you're not gonna get away by using a tape measure, because it's that critical. If it asks for 4.55, and you say, and the stick
You
is,
say 4 9/16, it's not 4 9/16.
you know, I mean, it,
5 6 to 5, so it's a little light of 4 9/16.
exactly, you know, so, and then the thing about it, remember, you have 16 segments. One mistake, 16 times
Right.
multiplied.
That's an inch. Yeah.
So,
Do you always have an even number in a row?
no, not really, not really. It comes, what determines there is, for instance, if you decide that you're gonna do 4 woods, this is 4 woods. Then of course, you need something that can be divided by 4, otherwise, it's not gonna work. Otherwise you can't have the sequence. But otherwise, if you're doing something like that,
Yeah. It's just whatever the thickness satisfies. You just,
there's a little difference between stay wood. This is almost like a segmented idea, but it's like this is stay wood. It's not like a segment, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a really large piece. And there are some rules in here that don't apply like they do in there. But in segmenting, you want to have you want to have the blade as perpendicular as possible, because just a little bit, like you were saying, just a little bit off,
Yeah, true.
that thing will just,
Yeah.
especially if you start moving the segment, that will wave, and it takes you a long time to get it straightened out again.
Right.
You know, so it's important to kind of have your beginning set up, have the dimensions right, and then cut. Now, there are different ways to assemble these things. You can do all of them, because basically you can. You can start from the bottom, number one, put it in a little container, number two, number three, number four, and have all of it ready, and then start assembly. You can do all the rings, you know, because, you know, glue
And
them,
avoid
put them on.
pieces cut.
And then when you have everything ready, I flatten one side, and we were talking slightly before. I like a flat, I have a 12-inch sanding disc. It's a metal-based sanding disc, so it's very steady. And I just go in there and, like, I usually go into it like this, and I hold it, thumb here and thumb here, and I just lay it out, and I stay flat as I can possibly stay on. Now, naturally, this one will sit mostly on the side, not in the center, you know, because if you go in the center, you gotta be careful with the thing, especially with the small ones, you know, it starts doing that. So stay on that side, but you gotta be careful now, this one will cut faster than this side. So all those little things, and you'll develop technique as you grow. And I'd usually take it and rotate it. Now, if I were to do sort of production work, then I would use a drum sander. And then put it on a plank,
Yeah.
put some tape, you know, keep it together and just run it through the plank, so you get a nice surface. The
No, you
important
got a
thing is
piece of MDF or something with double face
yeah,
on it.
something that has
Yeah.
stability on it. But, you know, do one at a time, so I don't do any production work, so I
Yeah,
just
right.
do one at a time. And the important thing is that you want that to be as flat as possible, okay? And that's the side that you will put on the mounting ring. And normally I do only one side, because once I have this mounted, it's gonna be mounted on a lathe. I use the lathe. I have the first ring, and it's mounted. Of course, the first ring would probably be closed almost. Mounted on, it's glued on. All right, so the next, I can turn that, and I can flatten that on the
Yeah.
lathe. So I don't have to
Yeah,
do
you
both
can
sides.
you can build up as you're going on the lathe. Oh, okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
I have a thing that I bought that has a plunger, it's called a plunger. Sits on a flat piece of plywood that you can bench, put it on the bench. And this thing's got a spring-loaded shaft that comes out, the tube that comes out. And you can take the ring, you know, and put it right down in the center of this little thing. And it has adjustable claws that catch it and center it, okay?
This is for your gluing?
Yeah, just for the gluing, yeah. And then you take the piece that you have already done, and you take that little plunger and put it right in the center over here, and you just lower it to it, so it centers it at the same time. It's okay, you know, but I prefer the lathe because I'm doing one at a time. Prefer the lathe, I have it lined up, and all I really have to do is in the beginning when the holes are smaller, you know, I can use a cup,
Mhm.
you know, bring up and I just, you know, line it up. And even if it gets this big, I'll glue both sides, I put it on, and I kinda juggle it until that glue starts almost
Yeah, just
catching.
grab, yeah.
And then I'll turn it by hand, and I can see when I'm off on it, and I adjust it down a little bit before I start.
Yeah,
And then I
you
put
tweak
it,
it, yeah, yeah.
then I put the thing around and it comes out.
You turn half and then level it up and then turn the other half and then put them together.
Well, for this particular case, not for that.
Okay.
Because this is a sphere almost.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to do it this way, but normally I start from the beginning, I start from here, and I come up, and then when I get up to about here, I do clean it up as I go. I don't do the outside. Outside is done when the thing is complete. But I do enough to leave one of the rings here, and I put a steady rest on it. And I help it because I'm out a lot out here. But this is done one at a time
Because
all
of
the
the
way up.
stick out.
Yeah, one at a time all the way up.
Huh.
And then and I do the inside though, as I come, all the way.
Oh,
It's
okay,
already
yeah,
finished
yeah.
inside. Now, when the last piece is on, then I got it trapped like this. I take the rest out of the way, and I do the finishing. Because then it's not gonna go in place, you know. And the same way it
And
happens.
you turn the top on the inside also.
You could. There's no reason why you couldn't.
That's the way I do it.
Yeah, all the big vessels usually are done that way, because, you know, otherwise you couldn't handle it. But in this particular case, you know, you can do this on this one. And definitely you can do it on that. But when it gets bigger, I did a couple of them bigger than this, and then what I did is I made a plate to fit, you know, and I still brought out my thing to keep it in line, and I worked it. But on an open vessel like that, you know, it's easier to work and clean up both sides as you go. On a closed one like this, you know, you have to be careful. You
And do
make
you
sure-
knock the holes in them, take out the bricks?
Yes, and that's one of the things. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. That's what you wanted me to talk to you about. But I thought it was necessary to kind of talk about this a little bit before we. And the important thing is this, because I think if I don't accomplish anything else today, then give you a little hint of how to sketch. And don't tell me that you can't sketch, because there's no such a thing as not be able to sketch. If you see something, you should be able to sketch it. All right. And the thing about it, then, what you do is with this, you can push it a little bit more, and do this. Get the shape and get the depth a little bit. But there's no such a thing. See, that's why it's important to have a silhouette of the wall size, because that determines the size and the thickness of the. If you don't have material in there, you won't be able. There won't be any there when you try to turn it.
Been there, done that.
We know.
Yeah. It's kind of like in design, they talk about paper prototyping. Because when you are like designing a product, we always tell people, it's always much cheaper to make the mistake on paper than to produce 500,000 of them, of those mistakes, and have to try to sell them.
And the thing is, most people understand and do something about the fact measuring, you know, thing in it. But I think it's important to think about the style, the form. You can do that on the form too. You can play around with a pencil. You know, pencils. Number 2 pencil is my most important tool, I think, because it saves you a lot of effort just to play around with it.
Yeah.
You know, and even if you don't do it like this, even if you sketch it only, and I don't care whether you have 30 lines, one of those lines is going to be the right line. And you'll see it. You'll see that line among 5 lines. And I'll tell you, after a while, you'll catch it. You'll catch the one that is just pleasant and falls in the right place. You may not know why, but you'll see it. And I'll tell you, I have done several of these vases for like this one particularly was one of the trip. We took a trip to Spain and Portugal, and the idea was that I told the group that I was with, friends, and says, when you go around today or the next week, I want you to take pictures of patterns that you catch, that really interest you. And most everybody fell for the mosaic sidewalks in Portugal and Spain.
Yeah.
You know, they have this stone side.
Yeah.
So this replicates those things. So I made about quite a few of those. And even though I had the drawing, okay, I had the drawing of 7, 1 of them was right on the money. The other 6 were okay, you know, but to me, I could tell that something was not right. They were right within the dimensions, you know, I had perfect dimension here, perfect height, you know, and everything was fine. But the little subtle, you know, move between here and here, and if it was a little fatter here, too straight here, you know, there were things that were not, and that's what I think you'll notice. You'll notice when you start doing that, and you start doing more and more of this, and you'd be surprised how much correction you can put, you know, and how much easier it is when you do have a plan. Not only for the math, but also for the shape. So, and that's how you probably can put a little bit of pizzazz in your turning. You know, it comes out a little bit more right. Now, I normally am the one that can't leave things alone. You know, so I come up with crazy ways to do. I did like the accent ring in here. This is typically not what a segmenter would do. Because it's totally wrong. You know, these are pieces that go this way, and that way, right? So they are no longer segmenters to an angle. They're segments, but they're just slits, segment. Okay, so, and I repeated that on the other side. Now, so what I had to do is do this, this, and this first, and then put an angle on the end of that little assembly. So, you know, that's a wrong way to do it.
So just the segment part is
The segment
angled,
part-
the inside part is straight.
Correct.
Yeah.
But outside, nobody's gonna be able to tell it,
Yeah.
see?
As long as you don't trim it too much.
And the farther down you go, the more in trouble you are, you know, so you put it right. So these are the kind of things that you wanna try, you wanna experiment, you wanna do a little something, you know, with it, something that you normally, you know, you just do something different.
Would I would make up one long stick with the pattern, you know, and then cut my segments.
Well, that wouldn't work for this. That wouldn't work for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably could work for this. Okay, but not for this. Now, this one actually was done that way. Was the stick, you know, was put together and then cut, and it was turned over. Each one was turned over in order to get this done. So all those little things are things that you're gonna play with, and this is what Tom wanted me to discuss with you guys today. This was put together basically like the standard, put the whole thing together. But I knew ahead of time that I wanted to take the segments out, and talking about what glue you use and whether you rely on glue.
Yeah,
You wouldn't be able to take
right.
the
Right.
segment
Tight
out.
bone's not gonna come apart.
Yeah.
They just don't. That segment, that glue joint is stronger than wood, you know, so what you do is, see that?
Holes in that.
There's 3 segments over here, see that mark?
Yeah.
There is a piece of paper in between this and this, piece of paper between this and this, and this. And so the segments are all put together, but you already know from the drawing which are the ones you're gonna take out. So you put paper in between them. You still have the segment glued, you still have the assembly put together, you can turn it, finish it,
Yeah, you do your hole inside and everything, yeah.
and now you can take it out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to take out. And I'll tell
And I
you,
do,
You mean you glue it with paper in between?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that it separates a little
Then
bit.
it tears on the paper, or is that basically how it works?
yeah, I do columns like that, big columns, and you
Mhm.
split them and they're one for each side.
okay, well, that's the one way to do it. Yeah, the thing about it is you do have to have it together to turn it,
Yeah, yeah.
and you have to have it reasonably reliable. You sort of have to glue it, otherwise you don't have much of a choice.
Do you do your sanding too with that before you take it?
Absolutely.
Finished also?
Finished all the way.
Everything.
And then you take it out. Now, like most one-time things, I did it down here, and I forgot the top.
Had to get the Dremel out, huh?
It took me about maybe 20 minutes to get the segments out. It took me 2 hours to get this little pieces in there. So those are the things that when you start
But you
doing.
had to carve it out with the Dremel.
Yeah, pretty much. I had to drill, keep it within a line and drill it, and then
Yes.
slowly go back and clean it. I had to use a rasp and a file and all kinds of things.
How do you take the segments out?
Well, let's see.
Yeah, it looks like you have developed some techniques for your glue, your clamping and whatnot.
Okay, so this is glued now. This I didn't glue those.
Let me move the base again so we can
Okay,
hit you a little.
yeah.
You're doing it, Frank.
So I only glued the little segments there.
Okay.
Oh, that's it, okay,
It snaps out.
yeah.
So basically is I took this. Doing my paste and I took
And that's just regular paper you're putting in there,
Regular
nothing
paper.
special?
Newspaper.
No wax, nothing.
newspaper because it's the right thickness. And if you put too thick of stuff, if you do something like this, you're gonna have
I'm
trouble.
gonna start screwing around with your distance, yeah.
Yeah, it folds around. But I took it and I took it on the highest and I have, you can say all of this was, I took it and I took on the segment
Okay.
and until it starts sounding, cracked, and then it come out. Once one comes out, the other ones are
Yeah,
just
right,
kind of,
okay.
And you have to sand the paper off the ones that are left. Okay.
But again, that's something that you want to play with. I mean, that's one thing I love about turning is that, there are rules, yes, but, the version right here, same thought. And the reason why I have that, which I've done before this, is because I'm playing around with negative space. I wanna do something that the eye follows the shape, but most of it is gone except the minimum amount of stuff, so this is just going there, I mean, from slowly going into that point. And, I have I'll show you some stay work. Bless you, thank you. I make roses, and wood roses. And I wanted to come up with some way of putting the rose in, and so that it made sense. Now, if you follow that, you see a vase there. See, when I got to this point, pretty much most of this stuff is a process.
Oh, yeah, like that.
Just to show you how you arrive to the kind of solution. Now, this is my thought, somebody else has got a different thought. But you can arrive to where you wanna go. And sometimes you have to take a long way, but technically, the idea is that you wanted to create sort of an idea that was a vase, but have the least amount of material there to show it. And here's, the first thought, just actually made a vase and then cut off and this is, but this I think is what the process is of solving, we're talking about solving problems. And I think that's the satisfaction that you get by getting to where you're going and coming up with this concept. So this is a stays, again, it's like segments, but it's done differently because this is different orientation on the wood. Still done on the thought of the angle of the segment, but it's a different cut, different, and here, this has got a floating thing on this, so because, as you know, when you have wood expands in one direction, but it doesn't expand in the other. So when you do something like this and you try to put a solid piece and
Can be a problem.
together, be a problem, expansion, it can crack. So those are the ideas that can solve that problem. Because I knew that if I would start on segmenting, I would be like going down,
Down the rabbit hole.
The rabbit hole.
would be the end of me, and sure enough it is, because that's the kind of brain I have. So this was the first piece. I took a class with Al Miyake. This was the first piece that we did.
Well, that's nice, huh?
Okay.
Nice.
Then last year, I took another class with him. Now this has a feature ring that is fairly complicated. Okay. So this is the thing. Now, this is one of the things that came after that. And then, what I want to show you is
Jeez.
Wow.
Wow.
then now, this is not segmenting.
That's basically that.
That
Piece
piece,
that-
that piece similar to that. Okay, so this is this.
Oh, wow.
And then
Oh, yeah.
now this is again my view of this one was I wanted to duplicate what you would see on the train going from Vienna to Thessalonica. There you go. I mean, that would be something, a T-set that you would see. And here is a combination of glass, segmenting, kind of intaglio, sort of, is this is laid out. And also is putting together around
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
So, this is what segmenting allows you to do. It helps you to do that kind of stuff. That's why I like that. And then, if you want to get a little bit more anal retentive,
Even more? Oh, wow.
Oh, man, jeez. There you go.
Wow.
No,
Let me see.
okay, now look at it and tell me what's involved.
oh boy.
Let me see the inside.
Cut it.
Yeah. So you turn this, well, I don't know where you but it looks like you turn this and then cut this out and put other pieces on.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there is one more move there.
Well, it's two turnings.
Oh yeah, and a split.
Split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's mounted.
I didn't notice. I thought this was round,
Yeah.
but it is slightly oval, isn't it?
Now, so
Or
in
ovalized.
order to accomplish, talking about solving problems, in order to accomplish this, which seems fairly routine, you notice, if you really pay attention, you notice that this piece right here and this one,
Are symmetrical.
no, I mean, they basically were, was one,
Oh,
was
yeah,
one
yeah,
first.
right.
And this one was one first.
Yeah.
Then were mounted on a mounting, and then piece was cut off, about almost 3/4 of an inch was cut off at the center.
Yeah.
And then united.
Or bring back.
What
Now-
was the material?
Hmm?
What's the material?
Material is mahogany.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's got a little sheen to it. But now there's another thing too, is that this segments here were 16. This segments were 12.
Oh.
Because if I made them 16, they wouldn't mesh
Mm-hmm.
those, because they were on a smaller surface, and a
Yeah,
smaller
smaller
diameter.
diameter.
So by making this 12 segments and this 16, looks like they're together, but they're not basically, they're not basically together. So this is how you can push it.
Yeah.
You know, you can go in this direction, and there are, it's basically putting the thing together and taking it apart and putting it together again. Now, then there is the other series that I did, and this is now, this is a combination of segmenting and carving. Now, I made quite a few of these, so I've learned that this was the very first, this was very number one. But I've done some, maybe I think it's 12 pieces in total. And the larger one is about this tall. So what I've figured out there is I did the complete donut first, okay? Then I cut it in half, and I had enough for two. So I started the second one already, and then I made these by hand. This were basically carved to fit from there on. So this is segmented up to this point, and this is not. This is one solid piece. So there are several ways to use segmenting, for your purpose. Now, this is not segmented, but
Right on your shirt.
I think I'm gonna stop turning right now.
That's not what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to start turning more and more now.
Yeah.
now here's a segmented helmet.
Very nice.
Just kind of push the idea. Now I actually have made a couple of helmets full size, with a segment. And it works pretty good because you can change the shape as you go, and make it so that.
So it's just bands of.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah, I think I may have. I don't know if I have some of the worksheets for those.
It's the
Here's
rare earth magnets holding it together.
Here's the worksheet for that particular one. Here's the worksheet for a ball, a little ball. Again, you're doing one side, because
Right. that's
the
what
other
I
side.
said, yeah.
Jake, so your tool will make it very spherical as you finish, after you glue it together and finish it.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks a
no,
lot.
if it's drawn as a sphere,
It's mostly done, yeah.
yeah, it'll come out as a sphere. I mean, as long as you keep the thickness when you straighten those bands out, as long as you don't take too much out, if you stay within what you figured, it'll be a sphere.
Yeah.
I was trying to. Yeah.
I did a same thing except they put a
This is a
10
sphere,
there on the
right here.
side.
Oh, for pivot?
And again, you measure basically as you go along, and if you
You put the man
start
Yeah.
taking too much out of it, you have to add one ring
Yeah.
before you put it together. The sphere normally goes into halves. But, okay, so this is the worksheet for being a sphere. I only work one corner,
Yeah.
because,
That's for this one.
yeah, for this one. Okay, what that's gonna be, it's a pumpkin.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
That's why it's so thick, because I have to
Oh.
take now the outside shape and shape it.
You've gotta get to work on that here. Finished.
Well, it's done, it's pretty much done.
Oh,
Now I
okay.
just have to glue it together, and then the outside, now the outside is gonna be a little bit of lathe, and mostly it's gonna be, I have a little sander, belt sander that is about a half an inch, things like that, that really gets into all kinds of, takes off material. And for that, it's good, because you can make a nice long pass coming down, and make the kind of
With
ribs.
the ribs, yeah.
Ribs sort of, yeah. But,
So,
So-
tough
so-
how it goes,
so-
right?
the biggest thing about segmenting is just setting yourself up with either the wedgie sled, or make yourself a jig for it, because otherwise you're not gonna get it in place. I mean, yes, you will,
Yeah.
but you will recognize the work not being right.
So you're going out 3 decimal places.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
pretty
well,
cool.
Well, he's gonna make 16 of them, so it's, you get that right.
Yeah.
It is, and most of the time, you say, no, couldn't be, no, couldn't be that much different. What, you can press it together.
Oh,
you
yeah.
can squeeze it.
Oh, you'll get it. Yeah, you'll gain it.
It's not,
Yeah, if it's too,
So you're
1/32 too big on each one, you're still gonna gain at the end, you use the half inch.
absolutely, yeah.
You know what I'm gonna say, but if I took a piece of, well, no, not paper, if I took a piece of wood, and once I cut that up, I take that piece of wood and mark it
Mhm.
on there, can't get any better.
Oh, you don't wanna mark, you wanna
As
set it
opposed
up
to a,
so
as
that you.
opposed to a
Well,
dimension, even if I
you
took a
know,
knife.
there is a way to solve that, and that is do it in 2 halves.
Yeah,
When you do the ring, do 1/2, and do the other half, don't glue the half,
oh, okay,
okay? And then you take it and you put it on the plate,
good tweak,
touch
yeah,
it, touch it,
yeah.
because you're gonna be turning it anyway. So even if it's up on the outside a little bit, but as long as the surfaces of the thing, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't care if the, if the things, move this way, as long as the joints are right,
Okay.
that's the key.
And I missed something else also. Now, I run this saw, I set my table saw on the angle that I need, okay? I set the table saw blade on the angle, right?
Well, no, you don't.
No, they're miter cutting.
Oh, okay.
They're using a miter.
Oh, I
You
got it.
might, yeah, I mean, you could do it that way, or you could
See,
do
I was
it,
thinking you stood it up like this with this on an angle and ran, no. But then that's where you gotta flip it then.
Right.
So, using a miter, you have the one.
One plane.
Like this, now
you're on one
Just a
plane.
miter cut on a table saw, is what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Oh,
you-
but you could do miter saw.
Yeah,
yeah, it basically is, if you divide, it gives you the degrees that you have to set it
Right,
up on.
right.
Once you set up the degrees, and if you have a double paddle type jig, meaning that the jig will look I'll make a quick sketch of what the jig looks like.
The jig's up.
this is what a double paddle jig will look like. This paddles move,
Yeah,
you know, both ways, okay. So, if you set, you can buy a template
right,
to fit right here and here, that gives you the degree for 16 segments.
yeah,
You put that in there, you secure the pieces. Now, what this allows you by having a double paddle, allows you to use the top of this with the stick. You don't have to turn the stick around, but the stick down
Yeah.
and use the inside of the next.
just move over the other,
So you get,
yeah.
you don't have to turn it around, you don't
Yeah,
have to
that's
just,
a good way of
no
doing it.
outside.
Cause
Basically,
now
the
it's not
stick,
confusing at all, cause you got one side and you got the other side.
Exactly.
You mark it where it's going, and that's it, and you set the next one.
Blades over here.
the blade is over here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the piece will sit right there, or right here, or right here technically. But of course you want the paddle behind it, so you want to be on this side
See,
and on
I
that side.
kept thinking he's got blades set like this, and he's running through here, so I was wondering when he said you
Okay.
can't
You
turn
give
over,
me
it's
here
going, now
and
you turn
here.
it to the other side.
Okay, cause you're going, yeah.
And so what you do, you cut, and then normally one of these will have a depth gauge, so that you can set up. So once you cut the first one, you measure it, you know, you measure the right thing on it. Then you cut all the other ones to that gauge.
You get it set first, and
Set first, yeah.
once you use your sacrificial piece,
Then
you're
you're
right,
right,
you're done.
So I'm,
Um,
assuming
The precision is just,
that people would
Well,
like
it's-
stop.
don't get me wrong, you can get away with a lot.
You just measure it after you do it.
It's just a matter of what you want it to be.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, right, you gotta stop,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
The more
You
accurate,
don't wanna
the
hit button up to the stop.
more accurate your connections are, and the better the piece will look. You know, you won't have, see, if you don't have the thing right, this lines here will show a gap.
Well, like here,
Yeah.
but we're talking, this was gonna be painted anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But that's what's causing this.
That's why you got to get that angle exact, is so that it's no matter, because some areas it's going to be close to the surface, other areas it's going to be deeper, and
Exactly.
you got to have it.
Yeah, the more accurate you develop your technique, and you do it whether it's a sacrificial piece like that or a piece like this, and the easier it is for you to get the results that you want to get.
So the number of segments in each ring is determined in your drawing.
Yeah, you determine. Well, this one right here is by far less than this, and by far less than this. Sure. You can go, I have a friend in California that does 44 segments per ring.
Wow.
Wow.
And I think I'm crazy, but-
Much of an angle.
And I think I'm crazy, you know, but so, you know, it's unbelievable what you can do.
And the increasing number of segments means that your decimal places go out even further.
Well, what they do though, I know what they do. They
Does that
do a segment piece to fit into, you know,
No, 4 degrees.
they do that. Then they do another piece.
Right,
And then the last 3 or 4 joints, they shave the piece.
Yeah,
Finish.
it's hand fit.
You can't beat that.
Yeah, yeah.
Not on wood.
Yeah, you can't
I
be
mean,
that
if
active.
you were in a,
20 games.
you know,
Machine metal, yeah.
machine metal, yeah, something like that, you probably could, but not on wood.
And I don't know why it works like that, but it works.
That's
And the thing about it is, what I really wanted you to get out of this is that you can push yourself a little bit and do something that is a little bit totally different. You know, and it gives you an opportunity to just kind of, mostly, it gives you an opportunity to use wood. I mean, you've got many pieces of wood that you can't, they're not big enough to sell, but here you can use them for, you know,
Yeah.
for something like that.
You can use everybody else's scraps and all their exotic wood scraps. That
My background also is, I studied on the lathe, metal lathe too. So that's,
much more
I fall a little bit easier into the measuring type that most people would do. But it's really not that, as we were talking there, it's not that complicated. It's just a formula that, you know, once you use it, and you pretty much know now that you have to observe, you know, when you glue something together, you pretty much know that you better be right, otherwise the thing is gonna fall apart.
Right.
You know, so, same technique, go for that. The other thing that you wanna do is, when you do something like this, for instance, you definitely wanna number everything, you know, so that you don't make mistakes. Which is simple to do.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you know, you put ring number 7 instead of number 8, and all of a sudden you got 7 sitting over there. You say, uh-oh. And most of the time, you can, because you got a little extra material, but you gotta make another ring.
Yeah.
Because you can't put that back.
Right.
So, little things like that. But if you like the challenge, you know, this will keep you challenged. And will give you a chance to do something, you know, with some weight that normally you don't have a chance to work with, you know, because you don't go out and buy, you know, rosewood all the time to do.
Right.
And you couldn't find a big piece like that anyway, but if you have a couple of plants of rosewood, you know, I mean, you get the effect, by not, you know, so, my favorite shape, you know, the last time we talked, my favorite shape is the sphere. I love spheres. I think that, I do a lot of spheres. I do baseballs, you know, you saw my baseball. And I think that, again, I go for that because a sphere is a sphere. There's no deciding on a shape. You know, you don't sit in there and say, well, the bottom is too small, or the foot is too. A sphere is a sphere. Either is a sphere or it's not. It's something else. So I love that. I love the fact that you want to try to make a sphere. And then you play around with carving. You know, you can get yourself, you know, all kinds of crazy things. You can do. I don't do a lot of color because I haven't gotten into it yet. Not because I don't like it, but
Their camera set up, yeah.
you can do something like this with a little texture and creating a little, you know, idea. Again, you tell a story with your piece, and it always comes up. You know, something comes in the back of your mind. Try it.
Oh, yeah.
Those are then
Is the
depressions
same
cut to the wood and filled with white.
Oh, okay.
I use milk paint. Milk paint is really hard. You know, once you put the milk paint in there, it won't come out. You know, so you fill it, and well, basically you don't have necessarily to fill it, but as long as you cover that area, you know, then you can do the outside, and it gets all cleaned up. But you know, texture. I like texture. I like it. And the last time.
Amazing.
Yeah, the last time we talked about basket illusion. That's another thing. I love basket illusion because, you know, again, you gotta be, segments are gonna be drawn, they're not cut, they're drawn, and you still have to figure out a way to do it right, because otherwise it doesn't look as good. And the better job you do, the better it looks.
So do you have, are there any, is the gluing pretty straightforward?
Yes.
I see you use those hose clamps, everything. Once, as long as you have those angles right, they just kind of whoop, go together and you don't worry about it.
I'll tell you, it's, you know, and you know right away if you screwed up. You know right away. You try to put that ring together, and all of a sudden you look at it and say, what the hell is going on? You know, and sure enough, you did something wrong. You didn't go to the stop. You had one segment that was an 1/8 of an inch, or even a 1/16 of an inch. And you think 1/16 of an inch only, the angle couldn't be that much different, you know, on that segment. It's only 1/16 of an inch less in length to fit that gap. But it'll show up. So if you stay within the locks, you know, and you, for instance, if you take the stick and you put it against, you should normally have the hands always on the same spot, have the same amount of pressure, and the more of that you do, and the more accurate these pieces are going to be. Normally, a ring like this will go together reasonably well. But now, if you start to introduce another segment in there, you know, and you do the ring with those pieces in between, now you're drawing in a little curve in there, because you're not gonna do angle on that piece, because it's virtually impossible. So you're gonna have to put a straight piece. So you're gonna do the calculation on the basis of that gap in each of the thing. But if you do that ahead of time, and you cut your pieces to go in there, once you take those pieces, because this and this are parallel to another, even though they're at an angle. So if you introduce a segment there, all you have to do is take it off the measurement.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. Yeah. But that's the key. The key is, and this is hard, the harder material, the harder, you know, the harder, this white for instance, is much harder than pine. This is just the test pieces that I have. And that would even work better. And what you wanna do, for instance, once you have the segment cut, is have a flat piece of wood with, say, 80 paper sheet glued right on it, and you take the piece and you just clean the corners. You don't clean the surface, because you may be able to, you're gonna be altering the angle. The saw has done such a good job of cutting it, you're not gonna fool around with that. But all you wanna do is take the fuzz out, you know, and you do that, and that stuff falls together.
Practical question. So
Yeah.
you got your jig and your arms adjusted.
Yeah.
And your strip against the arm, you pass through the blade, that's a little piece you're cutting off. How do you control, don't they fly around a lot?
Yeah. Not only they fly around a lot, but that's one of the areas that can cause fingers to be cut.
Yeah.
All right, the way I solved it is, I built myself an air pusher. What I did is, I have a hose coming to a valve, to one of those nozzles valves.
Yeah.
And I put a reduced jet on the front of the thing, and I attached, you know, I can quickly attach, and I have it on a magnet that fits on the top of my sled. And I point that
That's
right
good.
to where the cut is. And then I have a dust collector hose right on, you know, where the bin is, where my other side of the jig is flat too, and it has a gate around it, so the stuff doesn't go past it. And that thing, I have the air on all the time, make the pen, that little piece comes up, goes right.
That's why you have to mark the top and everything else, yeah.
Because, you know, they will not be in line, you know. And I don't, you know, because the guy that I bought the jig from says, well, you take a pencil and says, and make sure that you don't use one without the metal for the eraser, because I had the thing on it, once it tripped off the
Yeah.
saw, and it says, and you just push them away, and I didn't like that. So that's
Yeah.
when I made the air pusher, and it works like a charm. I just turn it on, a little valve,
Yeah.
pushes out.
Yeah, see, I cut a 45 of
Yeah,
wood,
wood.
and then I clamp it on the table saw so that when it comes through, it
Falls.
hits the 45 and then it is away from the blade.
Sweeps
away.
away.
And then you don't have to worry about it coming back at you or going on your neat shop floor.
Yeah, that's basically is, the standard sled, you can do that. My sled has got the same level where the sled is, and, where the you know, adjustment for the depth is all in one level. So the blade is right in between, so there's no room to go any place except there, so that's where the air pusher works very nicely. And I have a little, fence that I built for the back, you know, so that there's air going through, but other pieces won't go through. Even these big pieces, surprisingly enough, I have enough air to push them away. And normally by the time I get my 16 or whatever it is that I'm doing, I stop the saw, then I take it out and
Put it
Go to
in
the
the
next
box and go to the
box,
next, yeah.
number the container.
Mhm.
I have ice gelato that I buy at the
Exactly, use that as, yeah.
the right size, so I could, but the key is that again, the jig. I think if the jig is working right for you, your job is gonna be so much better. If it's not, you'll have to do a lot of adjusting, but you can, if you do like this one, if you do half of it, you put glue in half of it, and then you don't put glue right here, and you put glue on all the other ones, okay? And you tighten it, and you get it solid. When it dries, you take it apart, because there's no glue right in the middle. You adjust both sides on the flat 12-inch sander or whatever, we use it to tighten it, and then you put it back together again. And you compensate it for any mistake that you made. I see that.
Well, thank you very much, Frank.
Well, thank you for listening.
Very interesting.
Great.